Yeah, so I'm Joe. I'm an addict, and it's really good. It's really good to be um, amongst friends. It's been a little while. I spoke for this meeting. Um, well, it had to be after COVID started, so it's been a few years, but and it's always good to be back. I mean, every time I think of Pavilion, and I do think of Pavilion very often, it's just like a really special place in my heart. I don't forget where I came from, and one of the places that really set me in a direction I never thought was possible was Pavilion. I don't have a story where I went to multiple detoxes and multiple rehabs. It's just not part of my story. I went to one detox and one rehab, you know, and that's it. Um, and I'm not really sure why that happened that way. I've definitely used and by the way, so I identify as an addict. But it's funny because I don't go to AA meetings all that much anymore. My old sponsor, we used to go together, and it's so cool to listen to the preamble and the way AA starts the meetings. And there's so much in the fellowships that like cross paths. And I'm a I'm a dedicated member of Narcotics Anonymous. I still do a lot of service. Um, I go to meetings regularly. I sponsor people. I have a sponsor. I work the steps in my life. I'm doing all the things that I was taught early on in the process. Um, and so, but I do that in the fellowship in Narcotics Anonymous. And so so I don't it's not really about that tonight. I just wanted to say when I talk about my story, it's going to be from an addiction standpoint. I really do feel like I'm an addict. I think alcohol is a drug, so I was addicted to alcohol too. I'm addicted to pretty much everything. If I give myself enough time, I will find a way to enjoy it too much. It's just the way I'm wired. Anyway, so I came to Pavilion. Let's see, it was the day before, I think it was 2 days before New Year's Eve, 2006. I went into detox, um, Christmas Eve, 2006. And I went to a 5-day detox, and then I was flying. I'm from Connecticut, by the way. And I was flown down to Mill Spring in the middle of the night kind of deal. And I showed up right before New Year's Eve, 2006. And I was pretty much like a shell. It was really not all that much. I remember my counselor, Joe Nigel, who was there for a long time at Pavilion, and he's been gone now for a number of years. But he told me that when he met me out on the there was like the outside porch or whatever. He said he looked into my eyes and he didn't see anything there. It was just like there was nothing, and that's kind of the way I felt. Um, so I'll tell you a little bit about how I got to that point, but that was the point where pretty much my life changed completely is after I attended Pavilion, and it wasn't a perfect stretch after that. I relapsed after I left Pavilion, but it really set me in this direction that I had no idea what recovery was about. I thought I was doomed to die. I thought that's the way I was going to die. I thought I was going to die with a crack pipe in my hand. Um, and I was convinced of it. I didn't know there was anything on the other side of this. I didn't know there was any hope. I didn't know there was people in recovery. Well, that's not true. I did know that, but I didn't know it worked. I remember, little side note, I remember I was still using pretty hard, and a friend of mine that I used with for a long time, I called him up one day. I was like, "Hey man, where you been? I hadn't seen you around." And he's like, "Well, yeah, I got clean. I'm a member of Narcotics Anonymous," he said to me. And I remember thinking, that sounds awful. It sounds awful. Like, I just couldn't imagine not using. Like, I just didn't even, it wasn't in my DNA. I was like, there was no way I can do this. So, but I learned that it's possible when I attended Pavilion. And but just to really not spend a lot of time on the using and all that stuff, because I really do want to talk about recovery and what I do today to stay clean, and and live a spiritual life, and it says that in the beginning reading there, where, I'm not a saint. Um, I live a spiritual program. I really do strive to be a spiritual person today, but it's definitely not perfect by any means. But I've grown spiritually more than I ever thought was possible. And that's been through the help of step work and sponsorship. So, I started off, at a young age, I really felt like I lived in a bubble. As a little kid, I did not feel right. I felt I was different. And this is like going back to, 5, 6, 7 years old. I mean, I just never felt like I belonged. I always felt like there was something wrong with me. And I didn't know exactly what that was about, but I do remember just not being right, you know. I was bullied when I was a kid, and I wasn't a tough kid. I was a punk, you know. But as a young kid, I wasn't tough, and I always felt like I was not strong enough. And I'm trying to remember where I things started to go wrong. I remember I was obsessed with fire. It was weird. I was like lighting little fires out in the backyard and matches, and I got like really into that. And I always remember like feeling so excited by it, you know. And I mean, I remember there was this one time I was getting in a lot of trouble, and I don't know how old I was. I was probably like 6 or 7, maybe 8, and maybe a little younger than that. And I always remember kept getting in trouble lighting these little fires. And it was really dangerous. It was at one point it was like starting to get out of control, and someone had to run in and put the fire out, and it's a whole field could have burned down. I always remember my mother. There was a look in my mother's eyes when she looked at me after that. Like, she looked at me, and what I saw in her eyes was, what am I going to do with this kid? You know? And that's pretty much the way things went. What am I going to do with this kid? And that's the way I put my mother, my father through hell. My sister, I have one sister, she's older than me. I put my family through hell, and it started then. And it's funny because I could tell my story, and when I tell it through the lens of when I was in active addiction, I'm sure it sounds like really awful, but there's had to be times I just filtered it out where things were okay. Um, I mean, I had a loving family. My parents are still alive today. They're 82 and 80. Um, and they were good parents. They weren't perfect parents, but they stayed together. And you know, I learned things about my parents in recovery that I didn't know, and things that I learned and messages that they gave me, these coded things about anxiety and how to act and how not to act and stuff. But I'm sure there was some really good times. I don't remember them as much. It's just kind of weird. And but anyway, so I started using drugs. My first drug, I was drinking when I was 12 or 13. I didn't like it. I don't remember that night liking it. I remember being excited though. I mean, I was out with my friends, and I knew I was doing something that I probably shouldn't be doing. So it was like, and that's like kind of part of my theme. The theme of my story, it was always with the lifestyle. I loved the lifestyle. I loved the excitement. I loved, kind of living in the shadows. It was weird. But well, at least I thought it was weird. I found out that it really wasn't when I found the rooms. I was like, oh, okay, now I'm home. Um, but so I didn't really like drinking. I moved on to smoking weed. I smoked a lot of pot. I smoked and I drank pot. I never said I was going to do cocaine. I did all through that high school. I became a musician in high school. I played the saxophone for 30 years, up until the day I went into detox, and I haven't played since. Um, and that's been coming up on 16 years now. So my clean date, I say clean date, is March 17th, 2007. And I got out of Pavilion on February 9th, 2007. And I know I will never forget that day, because the day that my wife, who's still with me, God bless this woman, I've been with her for 26 years. Um, she came and picked me up, flew all the way down to North Carolina, picked my rear end up. And it was February 9th, 2007. And all I was concerned about was getting out. And I forgot to even wish her a happy birthday, which was the day before. So I always remember that day, because, and I didn't realize how self centered I was until really that day. I mean, even while I was in Pavilion, I didn't realize how self centered and um, just it was all about me. It's all about me all the time, you know? Um, so anyway, so I got through high school, I became a musician, like it started getting popular because of I got really good. I gotta say, I was a really good sax player. I practiced, I got home from school, I practiced for hours a day. I got really, really good. And I got involved with the music scene, and I was popular with friends and girls and all this stuff I craved when I was younger to fit in. I found it. And it was that lifestyle, it was the music, it was, drinking, smoking, it was doing all this stuff. I thought I was cool. And I did that through high school. And then in college, I went to college. I got into college. I don't remember much of college. That's where things really started to get pretty out of hand. Um, so I got to college, and I started using cocaine in college. I never said I was going to do cocaine. Got out of college. Fast forward, I got married. And again, I don't remember college all that much. I barely got out of there. And but I did graduate, and shortly after, I met my wife and we got married. And, once I got married, things really started to get pretty filthy. I gotta say, I started to hide things about me I wasn't even aware I could hide, because now all of a sudden I had to be accountable to somebody. So my dishonesty went through the roof. And I hid the fact that I was still smoking cigarettes, or at least I thought I hid. She probably knew. I know she knew. Smoking cigarettes. I was doing cocaine and she didn't know, or at least I didn't think she knew. Then I started getting into pills. And my next door neighbor had a back problem. He threw out his back, and he had Oxycontin prescribed. And that was my introduction to the drug that would take me to places I never thought I would ever go. Um, So I started using pills, and then the pills ran out, and I went to the streets for heroin, and I was strung out on heroin for uh, 7, 8 years. At the tail end of that, I was introduced to, well, I wasn't introduced to it, but I started using crack cocaine. And so I was, this is how I said, I'm gonna stop with the whole using thing after this, but I'll just give you a sense of where I was at. Um, I thought that I was getting better because I was using over a bundle of heroin a day, and I started smoking crack. And I always remember thinking, wow, this crack is really helping out with my heroin problem, because I wasn't using as much heroin. And I thought that was a good thing. I really did. I was like, wow, this is kind of working out. Maybe this is going to work out for me. And oof, boy, still makes my stomach turn. The things that I did to get high, um, the people that I robbed, all this stuff sounds cliche. I robbed from my kids' piggy banks. I robbed from my grandmother. Uh, I was doing all kinds of fraudulent stuff. I got fired from my job. Um, and and my life was a mess. And like I said, my wife stuck with me, but there was a point where she's like, listen, I got kicked out of my house. I don't know how many times. Alarm codes changed. the whole deal. Like you're not allowed. I wasn't allowed my kids. I had two daughters, my angels. They're 24 and soon to be 21, which is like, I can't believe it, man. It's nuts. But I was threatened with not seeing my kids. You know, when I go back and, this is the thing I've learned in recovery is about being responsible. Um, I was incapable of being a responsible father. I was incapable, you know, I was incapable of being a responsible employee, responsible friend. I mean, you name it, man, go down the list. And I think that's why things got so crazy for me is because I was just incapable of being responsible. I was afraid. I was this, I was that, I was the other thing. So I was threatened with not seeing my kids, and I was threatened with divorce, and then I got this one night where a friend of mine who I'd known for many, many years, literally, I was walking up and down the street in the town next to us, and he scooped me up, and my wife picked me up, and I told her at that point I was completely honest with her about what I was using, and she got me into detox, and then she got me sent down to Pavilion. And from that point, everything changed. Really, there's a lot of things that are the same in a weird way, but there's so much stuff that's changed since I've gotten clean, and I'm just so blessed. I'm blessed to be alive. I'm grateful to be alive. People say, well, I should have been dead. I don't believe that. I mean, I used enough to kill me over and over and over and over again. But I'm here for a reason. I do believe that. Sometimes I don't really get in touch with that as much. And I start to get, kind of the self-pity and the self-doubt and all that kind of stuff. But I've learned in recovery that, you know, first of all, it's not all about me. It's about other people. And I think because of that, I really have felt the beauty of like recovery in the sense that I am so blessed, man. All these people that are in my life today, I'm so grateful to have friends and my family. And I always took that for granted. I always did because I was always thinking about me, you know? And man, I just have so many people in my life today that care about me and I care about them. The friends that I have today, they're all in recovery. I have a couple of guys, actually, it's kind of weird. I have a couple of guys from my band um, that I just hooked up with recently, and I haven't seen them in years. And it was weird. It's a kind of a long story, but I ended up getting like connected with two guys that are really, really good guys. They didn't get hardcore into drugs, and I've known them for years. I played in my band with them for years. I went to college with them, and I hooked up with them, and it was so cool because I could be honest about who I was and what I was doing. And I don't have to hide anything about myself with my friends anymore. I can be like who I am. I'm free to be who I am. And it was so cool to cook up with these guys again. And we found out we have things in common, and it's not just about music. And one of the other guys actually is in AA, and he's got like 3 years. And we talked about that, you know. So anyway, so like I was talking about being responsible, and there's a couple of things that really I think the readings that we read in at the beginning. One of the readings that it's from the Narcotics Anonymous basic text, and it's in the Why Are We Here? And it's Why Are We Here is probably my favorite reading. It really does sum up what's going on and why I'm here. And I'll read it, and I'll tell you kind of a cool story. You mentioned Asheville, right? Ashland, about that recovery event. And I'm bummed because when you say stuff like that, I see it in the Lifeline. I was like, man, I'd love to be involved, because I just love that community down there. But I went to a meeting. I came down, I did some volunteer work. This is years ago. This is probably like 10 years ago, maybe. And I met up with Joe, my counselor. And I remember it was 5 years after I left. That was like some kind of magic number that once I had been out of Pavilion for 5 years, I could kind of like I don't know, like be in the same car as my counselor or something weird. I don't remember exactly what it was, but we went to this meeting. We went to an NA meeting because he was a member of NA too. And when they read "Why Are We Here," it was like it goes, before coming to the fellowship at NA, we could not manage our own lives, and everyone in the group, which is cool because all groups are different, right? All the groups are autonomous and they come up with different things about how they run the group. We could not manage our own lives. If everyone would go, why? We could not live and enjoy life as other people do. Everyone would say, why? We had to have something different. We thought we'd found it in drugs. Why? And then they kept going, why? And you can look it up, but um, and then it goes, he said, did many people great harm, but most of all, we harmed ourselves. And I was like, wow, I never thought about that. You know, I was harming myself. But then it goes, through our inability to accept personal responsibilities, we are actually creating our own problems. And everyone in the meeting goes, oh, that's why. And that is a big like foundation of my recovery, you know. And then it goes on to say in this reading, which really, it's like a life-changing reading for me. And it says there's three disturbing realizations. We are powerless over our addiction and our lives are unmanageable. Alcoholism, addiction. Although we are not responsible for our disease, we are responsible for our recovery. And that one's great too, but this is a kicker. We can no longer blame people, places, and things for our addiction. We must face our problems and our feelings. And that was like this mind-blowing realization. I mean, really, like, wow, like I actually had to take responsibility for myself. And I was 38 when I got clean, and I was acting like I was 14. Well, 12, 13, 14 is when I started using, right? And I was literally acting like a kid. I couldn't take responsibility for my actions. I was always quick to blame people for shit, you know. Oh, it's his fault that happened to me. It's this, that, the other thing. All about when it comes down to what, I have to accept things today. I have to accept my own responsibility. I have to be accountable. And I just wasn't able to do that. And through like going to meetings and sponsorship and people calling me out on my shit, and I've realized that, that I am responsible for my recovery. Nobody else is responsible for my recovery. I can't rely on a doctor not to prescribe something that I can get addicted to. I can't rely on the chef in the restaurant that's not going to maybe cook something with wine or put wine or alcohol in a cookie. I have to take care of that stuff. I have to be responsible for that. I have to be vigilant, as the traditions say. We keep what we have only with vigilance. And I'm coming up on I'm a couple of weeks short of 16 years. And over this time, I haven't been as vigilant. I remember first getting clean and I felt like I was the poster boy of NA, like, everything by the book, man. And then I realized how my perfectionism is a huge part of who I am. So I felt like I had to do everything perfectly. And that's driven me crazy in recovery. I was just doing this today. We're having our closets redone, and I need to pull all the stuff out of my closet. And my stuff's all over the place now. It's in my daughter's closet. They're not in the house anymore. They're both up in Boston, but I got some stuff over here and stuff over there. I was out of my mind today because it threw off my routine. Stuff's not where it always is, and that's the stuff I realize about myself. That's like those core issues that we talk about, like this perfectionism, this OCD personality that I have, which I really do believe the bottom of my heart like fueled some of my use. It's because I couldn't control stuff. And if I couldn't control it, then I needed to do something to make me stop feeling like I needed to control it. And that was get high, you know? And so today I realize that when I have those feelings, it's just a feeling. It doesn't have to define who I am. It doesn't have to dictate what I do. and I say all the time, man, if people knew what I thought, or if I was indicted on my thoughts over the last 16 years, or no, I shouldn't say that. I'm not going to say 16 because I don't have 16 years yet. I have 15 years and 300 and whatever days, right? If I was indicted on the stuff that I thought over this since I've been in recovery, I'd be in a lot of trouble. Be in a lot of trouble. I'd be divorced. I wouldn't have my kids in my life. I'd probably be in jail. Maybe I'd be convicted of some kind of, I mean, I don't know, because I still think some weird stuff, you know. It's a little disturbing sometimes. But then I realized that that's okay. It's just a thought. I don't have to act on my thoughts anymore. I don't. I thought if I thought I had to do, and I don't. Thank God I don't. I mean, really, thank God I don't have to act on what I think all the time, and that's what's kept me in this process of recovery. It's kept me with this loving family that I have, and my relationship with my wife has never been better. It's not perfect, you know. There's stuff that's come up, man. It's been really like jarring experiences that in the past it would have been an easy excuse to use over, you know, but I don't. I just, we say up here, I don't know if it's down there, I'm a member of the no matter what club. We're going to use no matter what. And I don't really get involved with that kind of stuff. I think that's, I try to like operate kind of under the surface. I don't even like speaking like this. Once you get me talking, I'm okay. But like right before I was coming on, I was like, I start to get scared. I'm like, well, what am I going to say? I know this is funny because I say to myself, well, I don't have to prepare for this because I'm just telling you, being as honest as I can with you. So I don't have to prepare for that. It's not like I'm reading from a script. But then right before I'm going to get going, when I've spoken before, I'm like, I start to get nervous. Um, and it's, I don't know. I don't know what that is, you know, but anyway. So one of the things I want to mention too that's been really important to me is step work. Um, it's been really it's transformed my life. It really has, and I have a great sponsor now. I've actually had this is my third sponsor, and my first two sponsors have died. And my first sponsor was um, became my closest friend in recovery, and he's been dead now probably like 7 years, and he died of some kind of blood cancer thing with some kind of weird illness that he had. It was like a really rare form of cancer, and I miss him. I do. I miss him a lot. I think about him all the time. I sat by his bed when he was dying. I held his hand. You know, my second sponsor, and this is something I try to do. I don't do this perfectly, but I learned this lesson. My second sponsor, I was at a meeting, and he was coming. I went to the bathroom. I took a bathroom break, and then I was coming out of the bathroom and I saw him getting on an elevator. And I was like, Frank, I was going to say something to him, and the elevator closed, and I want to say goodbye to him. And it's like, I'll talk to him tomorrow. He was dead tomorrow. The next day he died. And I didn't have a chance to speak to him. Like the day, like it was like a rapid descent. Like he just went into sepsis, I guess, was his organs. And he never talked about him being sick. He just didn't. He didn't want to make it about him. But I realized that like today, if I want to, I try to tell people how much they mean to me when I have the chance. Like I don't want to say because I can think about, man, this guy's man, he's so cool. I love listening to him share in a meeting. I love what he does, like how he lives his life. And I try to tell people that now, so they don't regret that I didn't say it to him someday. And Frank taught me that lesson. In his death, I learned that lesson. and he was the guy that always told me that there's always something about someone's passing that you can take something from it. It doesn't have to be like this crushing experience, which I always looked at. That's, it was always that self, how is this affecting me? How is his death affecting me? As opposed to like what all the other people in his life, how is it affecting them? And anyway, so celebrating life. And my current sponsor, man, he's had me on the sixth step for like a year and a half. This is the second time I've been through, right? And he, I've been on this step for a year and a half, and I was getting really kind of aggravated with him, you know. And he was like, "Listen, man," he goes, "You're not getting this." And I was like, "Yeah, but I've already been through this." He goes, "I don't care," you know. He's like, "You're not getting this." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like, "Listen," he goes, "if you how can you expect defects to be removed if you're still using them?" And I was like, "Wow, that's." I go, "But isn't that the seventh step though?" And he goes, "Well, so you're gonna wait to the seventh step to stop using your defects?" It blew my mind. It really did. I was like, I never thought about it that way. And it talks about in the sixth step about personality change, about really changing, like change, real change. And and I learned that late in recovery. And I love that. I love that. Um, being open-minded and teachable. I do. I really do. From the bottom of my heart, I really do. I try to stay humble. Uh, Sometimes, you know what? Sometimes I think I take it a little too far. I'm always like, well, there were so many other people involved in my recovery, and I this is all God's work, and I do believe that. But I remember there was this one woman who I worked with, and gave me a compliment one day, and she goes, "Joe, man, you did a really great job on this particular thing." And I said, "Yeah, you know what? But there were other people involved. This is all recovery stuff I'm saying." And she just stopped me and she goes, "Can't you just say thank you?" She goes, "Just say thank you. You don't have to explain yourself all the time, you know?" And she was right, So I've humility is also recognizing, the assets and the positives. It's not about, always saying, well, it's not as what it seems. And so anyway, so that's kind of the way I wanted to end this, is that, to this day, I really still do feel like I'm learning. I'm still learning about myself. I'm still learning about what recovery is. I read wow, well, first of all, I get thought of the day, which is really one of my favorite things. The Pavillon thought of the day. I still get that. Oh man, I use that with oh, by the way, I didn't even mention all this. See, this is the stuff I'm going to remember when I hang up and I'm like, my guy, I can't remember. I cannot, I didn't tell them. I didn't tell them that. I didn't even tell them that. So I'm going to say this real quick. Um, because I met Joe, my counselor, he inspired me to become a counselor. And I'm a licensed professional counselor today. I have a private practice. I teach at the local university because I'm a licensed professional, and I teach people coming through the program how to be counselors, which is just like mind-boggling that this is happening in my life. Like it still blows my mind. Um, but it's now I lost my train of thought. Oh, thought of the day. So like the thought of the day I use with my clients. I use that to live by. I read thought of the day. I read just for today. I read spiritual principle for today. If you guys are into Narcotics Anonymous, this is a great new book. It's a spiritual principle of the day, and it goes through like today's spiritual principle is what's today? The fifth, right? Yeah. Free to simply be. It's okay if I don't know. I will enjoy the freedom to just be. And it goes through like a whole reading. So what I do to maintain my recovery is I read something every day in the morning. I pray. I try to stay humble. I try to think of other people, you know, and I started, like I said before, really do try to stay teachable, uh, because I don't like if I don't do this. Someone told me if either I'm walking towards a drug or away from a drug. Like if I'm standing still, I'm vulnerable to get picked off, you know, because I've seen a lot of people relapse with significant amount of time. And I'm always curious about what happened. And someone told me they were walking towards it, or you're walking away from it. Because if you stand still and some bad stuff can happen, you know. So I really do try to stay vigilant. I really appreciate being here. I miss Pavilion. When I go down there, it's like wearing a warm blanket when I go down there. I feel so much love. It's great to be able to see that that magic is working down there. And I really do. I want to try to get a little more involved. Every time I get like a message from Judy and now Ashton, I'm thinking, you know what, maybe I could join more meetings or just have a voice and jump on this, the beauty of Zoom now, right? So again, thank you for allowing me to share my story with you, and I hope you got something out of it. So thanks.